All right, guys, today we're going to go over what do the belts mean. I see a lot of videos like this, and it's a conversation that if you've been in jiu-jitsu long enough, you will be talking about this with different people. Everybody has a different idea of what the belts should mean. Some people think that you should get them based on tournament results. Some people think that you should get them based on skill acquisition. Some people basically treat it as like a marker of time in the game. Um, I'm going to talk to you guys today about what I think is the most valid way to look at belt development and what you should be able to do at each belt. What kind of skills should you be able to show to actually earn each belt? And based on my opinion and what I think really makes someone a white belt, what really makes somebody a black belt. So, first we'll just get into a little bit of background in terms of like what the different schools of thought are on the different types of like belt promotions. So, um, and we'll get into a little bit of context with this first one, but the first type of belt promotion is based on time. This is my least favorite kind. Um, I understand why people do it. I understand that there are forces at play that make people feel incentivized to treat belts this way. This could be, you guys have all seen like any kind of just McDojo. Honestly, it's typically a gi school. I'm not gonna lie, it's typically a school that does gi. They basically base the belts on how long the student has been training. Now, I understand why they do this. Part of it is because they need people to stick around, and the belts are almost like the equivalent of a points reward system for Chipotle or something, right? They're trying to keep you around and engaged and paying a membership, and the way they do that is by showing you very every so often that yes, you might earn another belt, and so people put a lot of emphasis on these belts, especially if it's a gi school because you guys are seeing them on each other every day. Every day you come into a gi school, you're putting on a white belt or you're putting on a blue belt, and you're hoping that one day that thing turns blue or it turns purple, right? So that's a really effective marketing strategy, basically, to keep people interested in coming into the gym, hoping that they can basically get this like equivalent of a certificate of their skills. Um, on the other hand, there's some obvious problems with this, which would be people can get belts in their trash. I've met a lot of people that are like that. So um, I'm not a fan of this, and I think that before gyms were really commercialized, the belts meant a lot more. At this point, they mean a lot, but also very little. And just as a side note, this is why another reason I think the sport would be better off, basically being majority no gi, um, if not completely, just because this issue of like trying to get people to stick around and be interested just to get their next belt doesn't really come up as much in nogi because nobody wears the belts. So everybody just kind of forgets they exist. You're really like looking at learning skill at that point, not belts. There are still people that do nogi that like just want to get belts, and I get that. But overall, it doesn't create that same culture where people are obsessed with like that guy's the black belt because he's wearing a black belt. I see it every day, and he beats me up in the beginning. He might not even be that good. You might just not know that much. And when you're brand new, everybody seems good. But like then there could be purple belts or even blue belts at other gyms that smash the black belt from your gym, and you just don't even know that. You grow up in this environment and you train in this environment that idolizes these belts. So that's really the first one. There's a ton of gyms that operate like this. Most people are time in belts, time acquired belts. So it kind of degrades the worth of a belt. It's like how everybody goes to college now. It almost doesn't even matter that you go to college, even if you're talented academically. There's so many people that go that aren't talented academically because now it's made to just make as much money as possible that it'll let anybody in. There's all these stupid colleges out there. Um, so the people that are not academically gifted should probably just not go to college. They should probably be doing trades or something else, which is fine, but it's just a similar effect in my view. So next we have schools that promote based on tournament results. So tournament results are interesting because tournament results can be more useful in my opinion than if you're basing it just on time, because what basically happened, what I mean by this is like you could be a white belt, and if you go to a white belt tournament and you win the whole white belt tournament, then your gym might give you a blue belt. Is that better than based on time? Probably, because now you actually have some evidence backing up that you have some skills, but at the same time, it depends on where you live. You might be in a state that's not very impressive for jiu-jitsu. Maybe only a couple people turned out that day, so you beat like three guys in your white belt tournament. It's not as meaningful as an ADCC Open or IBJJF Worlds or something like that. So it really depends on the context of that, and then also maybe if it's repeated tournament results. If it's repeated tournament results, that's more valid to me, because then yes, roughly people are at the same skill level across the board. If you've been to multiple tournaments and had multiple tournament results that are good, then maybe that's also a good sign, and you should be promoted accordingly. The one caveat I have to that is that the stuff that we're talking about today is totally a systemic problem. Like there's so many belts that shouldn't be a purple belt. They shouldn't be a blue belt, based on skill. And so you might be going to tournaments and you're beating guys who are blue and belt only, right? They're blue in the fact that they have a blue belt, but they don't have the skills that I think really should be acquired to even have that belt. So you could be just beating other people who got their belt out of time constraints, right? And so it's very difficult for me to get on board necessarily with just the tournament results thing either. I think if it's a huge tournament and there's like great guys in there and you really can validate that they beat a lot of really good people, then yeah, by all means, that's a great way to go about it. But a lot of people are just doing it with like small local tournaments, and they might not know any of the guys, and those guys might be guys that got their belts just through time on the mats, and it's not necessarily the most accurate thing to me. Then we have schools that promote based on skill, which I think that's honestly the best route to go. So this will be your coach having done their homework, having acquired a legit black belt themselves, actually having the skills to be a legit world-class black belt themselves, and then being able to impart the wisdom of what they think skills you should have by each belt, and then watching you accordingly. This way is not popular because it's going to take significantly longer. It's going to take significantly longer than based on time. And it also can be frustrating for different members of the gym because some people just develop faster. It's not necessarily going to, I almost want to take that back because it's not necessarily going to take longer. It's going to be based on how quickly you really can learn those skills and like synthesize them all into your game. And so it could be shorter for some people, and some people could take forever. Some people might not ever get it if you go based on this method. And honestly, I think that's fine. I don't think it should be watered down like that. And so the other kind of belt promotion that I'll touch on with this is, and I think this is the best one, is relative skill. So not just skill, but relative skill, meaning we have a skill requirement, but they also want to see that you can hang with some of the best people at that belt, right? You will never be embarrassed going somewhere else, to like a new state, a new gym, and training with some of the best purple belts in the world. You're not gonna have any issue, right? So my gym personally, my coach is named Chili Jameson. He's a 10th planet black belt, Andre Eddie Bravo. That is his kind of on it. That's kind of his outlook on it. He's trying to make sure that his people that he promotes to colored belts will be able to hang with any gym they go to. So it takes longer. I've had people tell me I should be a higher belt, and I think that's because their perception is based on time. And Chili's, my coach, just as a personal example, his perception is based on skill acquired, relative skill, and then also potential, right? So I think that's a third one that we need to mention, or a final one that we need to mention here, is the aspect of potential, because yeah, there can be guys that are older and maybe they're past their prime and they're trying to become a black belt. I don't want to hold out on them having a black belt just because they can't compete with like world class competition. That's not the point. But for their skill level and for their age bracket and their mobility level, like what they can still do with their body, how good have they become? I think potential needs to be taken into account. It's a lot more interesting when you still have somewhere to look forward to rather than like, oh, I'm already at black belt, and that's it for me, right? So we'd like to look at it with relative skill, in my opinion. Relative skill, meaning if you're a purple belt, you can hang with the world's best purple belts. You're not going to be embarrassed. You're going to be able to give them a tough round at least, right? You can also base it on skill, those two together, and then your potential, right? So some people have a higher potential than others. Some people learn super fast, and some people forget what they just drilled, right? There's just different athletic attributes, just like there's different mental attributes. Some people perform really terribly in competition, some people don't. That's another reason I don't really like the tournament result thing, is because they could have the skill to be an amazing jiu-jitsu athlete, but they just don't have the tournament mentality skill. And that's a different skill in and of itself. You have to work on that stuff. So I don't even know if I would factor that into your belt level, because they could be performing not nearly as well as they could in a tournament. And then if you send them to a gym, they could hang with the best guys in the world. We all know a guy like that. So it's something that I want to base this on is skill, relative skill, and potential. Okay. So now that we've talked about the different schools of thought on how belts are used, how they're used to what the promotion parameters are and things like that, let's talk about what each belt means to me. So to me, a white belt, very obvious. You don't really know anything. You're just getting your bearings in the grappling world, right? There's so many things that you just don't understand, and it's fine because there's such a large plethora of different things you have to learn to become competent in this sport. It takes a long time. People don't just get really good really quickly, and the rare cases where you see that are either they're very gifted retention, like memory wise, they can learn really quick, or their coach has given them skills, very limited skills that perform very well at competitions based on style matchups. So I'm not going to go into performance. I'm going to talk about skill, right? This is going to take longer than performance route. So if you guys ever heard of Dima Muravani, he talks about how you can train two athletes that, let's say they're identical. Let's say it's the Rotolo twins. And you could take one and teach them the skill way from the ground up, or you could teach them the performance way from the ground up. Performance way would be focusing on learning wrestling first, and then learning how to disconnect from leg entanglements and be very, very good at determining when you engage and when you disengage in a match. And that can win you a lot of tournaments because you can control the pace of the match. You're not going to get put in submissions as much because you're good at just like running. You're basically running away. Tactically, you're running away. And then you're also on top. So it's easier to score when you're on top. Most people have terrible guards, especially at lower levels. So you're going to win a ton of tournaments at lower levels very early on with this method, with performance. But I'm going to talk about skill. And skill is where we build from the ground up, meaning pin escapes all the way to guard retention to finally some submissions from bottom, and then top game, passing, then wrestling. And it's all like a layer cake, right? So this takes way longer, and you're going to not have the immediate tournament results necessarily. Because a lot of tournaments based on points. So if there's no score, it could be just the guy who's on top. If you're not even learning wrestling, then you're kind of setting yourself up for some early struggles, which is fine. This is the way that I'm doing it. This is the way that I feel like it's happened for me. I'm like 5 years in now, and my tournament results are finally like clicking with the skill level I know I have, right? And it's interesting that he talked about that because now I'm seeing it play out where I didn't start with wrestling and just like learning to disengage and stuff like that. But I know a lot of people that did. And when I was brand new doing tournaments, they were difficult to deal with. And now they're not. So Um, it's two different schools of thought. Neither one of them is better than the other, but it's interesting to think about. So again, for white belt, you're just learning you're brand new. You don't have any real background in grappling. If you're a wrestler already, I'm not even going to call you a white belt because you're just not. I would say you're a blue belt. You are a seasoned grappler. It's like saying a guy that did boxing just because they're in Muay Thai means that they don't know striking at all. That's ridiculous. So, um, a white belt is just getting their bearings. Think about the things that a white belt doesn't even know. They're developing things that like we take for granted later on. Like the the instinct to have eyes in the back of your head when somebody starts going towards your back. Like anybody who's been doing this sport for a year plus has that automatic instinct that like if their back is exposed, they scramble to make sure that it's not exposed anymore. And normal people don't even have that instinct, right? So white belts are just developing all of those different things that like don't put my neck here. Oh, this if my limbs are extended. They're just learning the very basics like my limbs get extended, that's bad. You know, might get submitted. I don't want to leave my neck down here. I might get guillotined. My head level's too low. I might get guillotined. These are very basic things, but I would say that in order for them to become a blue belt, so white belt is kind of a catch-all for anybody that just doesn't have these next prerequisite skills. So for blue belt, I'd say you have to be able to escape every major pin. And honestly, I would say the minute ones as well. So our defense is something that we're going to be developing through our whole entire jiu-jitsu career, especially because moves and counters to counters always keep developing in this sport with new people coming in and coming up with new ideas and the meta changes and stuff like that. But the defense should always be one of your deepest attributes because you can't control what somebody attacks you with, right? You can control what you like to use on offense, and you can try to funnel people to that, but you really can't decide like how a guy's going to attack you. So if you're thinking like, let's just say, I don't know how to get out of mount. Well, that's pretty dumb to allow yourself to not know how to get out of mount very well because what if the guy puts you in mount? Then you're just like admitting that you're just going to lose a match because you don't know how to get out of mount. I mean, it's a very, very obvious, gigantic hole if you don't have pin escapes by blue belt. You really need to have answers to all the major pin escapes. That'll be mount, side control, knee on belly, shin mount, leg drags, back. You need to be able to get out of the back. So, like even just doing the fundamentals of those at a high level is great. That's all you need. That's really my major thing for blue belt. You just in order to get a blue belt, you would need to have that skill, right? If anybody that's a white belt can hold you down at all as a blue belt, that's a problem. And if anybody that's a blue belt can hold you down for any significant time once you have a blue belt, that's a problem. Once you get to the higher belts and they can hold you down, that's a different story. They have more experience in controlling pins, especially if they've been learning it skill wise. They're already learning pins in like top game more than you, right? Because I'm talking about this and purely how I would teach people. You would be learning basically bottom game for the first like year or two, based on till you get to blue belt, right? Um, so yeah, when you're a blue belt, you need to be able to have answers to all the major pins. And then what you're also doing during blue belt is building guard retention and exploring different subs, offense and defense. So I don't think anybody's expecting a blue belt to have like expertise even in one sub, but I think that at this point it's really important that you start to explore all the subs, all major subs. I'm not talking like something obscure like calf slicers. I'm talking about triangles, leg locks, arm bars, guillotines, rear naked, and kimuras, right? Those are like the 6 major systems of submissions. So as a blue belt, you should be focusing on learning and familiarizing yourself with all those, kind of like sampling and tasting, figuring out what you like, right? And then also, the more important part of this than learning the offense is to use the offense to reverse engineer the defense. So your defense is something I'm always going to front load, right? I think it's for the same reason we just talked about. You cannot have an obvious hole in your game. That's just like irresponsible because you can see that coming, right? It's not like You know, if I if I don't have some offensive skill and I happen to be in a tournament and I find out like, oh, if I just knew how to like do a cross ashi inside heel hook better, then it would have worked perfectly on this guy because I just realized he doesn't know what he's doing here. You can't foresee that, but you can foresee that you just don't know how to get out of a triangle, right? So if somebody puts you in a triangle, that's pretty high likelihood you're just done. So that's really not like, in my mind, that's not acceptable to allow yourself to just not know those things. If you don't know them and you're actively working on them, then great. But like if you're just don't know them and you're fine with it, I think that's not a good indication for you as like a competitor if you want to be a competitor. And for me, I'm looking at this mostly as a competitor standpoint. Um, so for blue belt, we need to be able to have all the major pin escapes, and then we're starting to work on guard retention, really seriously, and we're sampling different subs and mainly learning the defenses to the subs, and we're trying to figure out kind of what we like, right? And then by purple, by the time you get your purple belt, there should be a clear style to your game at this point. I think by the time you get to purple, there will definitely be a wheelhouse that you're good at, and it could be just one thing. It could be just, I'm great at deep half guard, or I'm great at butterfly half guard, or I'm great at butterfly guard, close guard, whatever. Just one position, and maybe even just one set of submissions from one position, but you should have like a go-to that is starting to become your style. And it should be very clear what that is. I think that makes you different and makes you more of a worthy candidate for a purple belt, because now you're starting to enter the higher ranks, and just being good at being better at like one thing is more valuable than just like knowing a little bit about a bunch of things, right? Like you do at blue belt. So once you have like a style, you're going to be able to rack up wins. You're going to be able to get a lot of good experience through winning, and then you're going to start to branch off of that style. So you're like, now you've become a serious threat, and you're at the very beginning of being a serious threat, where you're going to start branching off and like starting to build out your other submission trees, like your other skill trees, basically. So then you should also have very well developed guard retention. So you should have been spending your blue belt time at, if not earlier, working on guard retention, since that would be the next skill up from pin escapes, right? So pin escapes is like the very bottom of the barrel. If you don't know anything, you're going to get pinned, right? So we have to learn that first. And then if you don't know how to get, it's like now you know how to get out of pins, but people might be able to keep pinning you because you don't have a guard. So when you're in blue belt, you're learning how to retain guard. So while purple belt, you need to be able to have really good guard retention to the point where it's pretty difficult for people, especially anyone below you or at your level, to pass you. Okay? And that is, again, we're building up from the ground up. And you should have decent familiarization with most offense and defense, but again, mostly defense, right? If you have to skew your efforts in the favor of one versus the other, I would say like 70% defense, 30% offense, maybe a little bit less, 60% defense, 40% offense. And so you're building a style, but you want to be very good at a couple things rather than try to like do everything, right? And you want to have very good defense to everything. So you're going to be doing more and more submission defense at this point, because now you've already built up the ability to pin escape. You've already built up the ability to defend some submissions, but now you're going to build up even further and deeper into submissions. Like, what about not just a triangle, but maybe now it's a Hantai Senkaku, or like an opposite way triangle, or a Yoko Senkaku side triangle, right? Like really getting into the weeds and like learning, oh, this is an outside heel hook, this is an inside heel hook. I need to do them differently, right? You need to have familiarization with those things. That's super important. Sometimes I see colored belts, or purple belts in particular, that like don't know any of that stuff, and it's just like, why? You have so much time on the mats, and I know you're training every day, but it's like you gotta try to like suss these things out, so that you can get to a higher level. And because people are not going to just hit you with like normal triangles and normal arm bars at high level. They're going to have all kinds of different ones, right? So you need to be prepared for that. Um, and then you're also learning to funnel to your sub. So if you have a game, you're starting to learn how to like impose your game on people. And that's going to be like learning how to try to make them come into give you inside position, double inside. Let's say you're a leg locker. You're trying to really learn how to funnel the double inside position where you're always going to get your leg entries, something like that. So you're starting to learn a little bit of tactics now, right? We're not just learning techniques now. We're learning a little bit about tactics where we can start to be able to funnel people to what we want, which is kind of a big deal. So now let's talk about brown belt. To be a brown belt, for me, you're going to have multiple strong suits. You're going to have familiarity with all positions and subs, offense and defense. You're going to have defense still being very impressive, even more impressive than your offense. And at this point, you're going to start playing a lot more top. You're going to start to learn how to pass, and you're going to start to learn how to wrestle. You could be learning how to wrestle during this whole process. I'm an advocate of people learning from the beginning, but if I have to teach you exactly like what to focus on at what time, you're going to be starting to play way more top. Your bottom game should be super developed at brown belt. And now you should be learning how to play top, because top is something that must be earned most of the time, right? So when you go to a tournament, most people don't, unless they just like playing guard, they don't really give up top easily. So your default would be that you're on bottom if you're unsuccessful. That's why we're always trying to look at it this way. What skill should you build first? It's the one that's the lowest common denominator, right? It's the one that you're most likely to get if things go wrong. So starting to learn passing at brown belt, you should be starting to really like solidify your passing at brown belt, really exploring that deeply. But you're also going to have multiple strong suits on bottom. You're going to be very familiar with all positions and subs, offense and defense. Defense is going to be extremely impressive. And you're also going to be linking a lot of your styles. So the linking of your styles is going to be very prominent. So it's not going to be just like I play isolated leg locks. Now I know how to do leg locks to upper body submissions, or I'm attacking a triangle, they pull up and I go into a leg lock, right? So we're starting to attack the whole body. And we're starting to link our styles together into intelligent systems where we have dilemmas, trilemmas, and things like that. So I think brown belt is you're almost to black. I mean, there's some interesting things that I really think a black belt should be able to do, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But yeah, you're basically going to have a sick bottom game at brown belt, and you're going to have familiarity with all offense and defense. Your attack levels are going to be much more expanded, but still smaller than your knowledge of defense, in my opinion. And then you're going to be linking your different skills together much better. So you're going to actually be able to flow between skills. And then black belt, your black belt should be able to do all these things. At this point, if you're a black belt, you should be able to play everything. You should be able to play, you should have a great bottom game because that's what you started out, that's what you did most. You have amazing defense. You should be familiar with literally every form of defense, unless it's like the most minute stuff, right? You should have a pretty expanded wheelhouse of things you're really good at. Obviously, I'm not expecting all black belts to be amazing at every technique. That's not realistic, and honestly, you don't have the ability to use every type of offense in every match, so it's just not even necessarily worth trying to do. But you should be able to have familiarity and do a average job of like completing most, if not all, submissions, I think, to some degree. And then they should be very familiar with everything. They should be able to play bottom. They should be able to have great guard retention, amazing pin escapes. They should be able to guard pass. They should be able to wrestle. Even if they're not the best wrestler, they got to be able to be defensively responsible with wrestling and be able to funnel it to their game if they get taken down. And then they also need to be exceptionally strong in one thing. So this is something that Gordon and John Danaher talk about as well, is that to be the best in the world, you have to be great at everything and then the very best in the world at one thing, right? So for Gordon, that might have been uh, he was the very best in the world at leg locking, or he was the very best in the world at RNCs, right? Rear strangles. So um, it's it depends on if you're a competitor, obviously, and not everybody's going to get to a level where they're actually world class level, like best in the world at some submission or some facet of their game. But you can be, you can get to, yeah, you can get to world class level at one thing, right? You can get exceptionally good at one thing. Like everyone in your local area should know that you're good at this one thing, right? As a black belt, they should be like for me, um, my coach, like everybody knows he's got amazing leg locks. Everybody knows his ankle locks are really, really good, and everyone locally knows that. So like that's an example of somebody that's a black belt that I know personally that has this quality, right? And then black belt, another big difference between them and brown belts is that they're really implementing tactics at this point. So I would almost call this like advanced fundamentals, because these things are not difficult to understand, but they're very difficult to do in the moment when you're new, when you're still not sure about how to perform moves and techniques. Once you're a black belt, those motor skills and those movements to different positions and submissions and things like that are going to be so fluid for you that now you don't necessarily have to think about those. You're thinking about how do I play my game and impose my game on somebody through tactics, right? So your tactics are going to be like, I one thing I like to do that I'm trying to really implement a lot is changing levels all the time, making it very unpredictable, right? Um, so like if I'm playing seated guard, I heist up, I pull on their head, and then I start to come up. If they come up with me, I go back down under their legs. If they don't come up with me, I go to a front headlock. If they come up and I don't get anything, I shoot back down, and then I go back up and do it again. So I'm not even necessarily looking for one and done submissions or one and done movements that get me something. I'm looking to wear people down. I'm looking at the long game in my matches. I'm trying to see, can I wear this person down? Can I make them feel uncomfortable even sitting here with me? Can I make them get out of their step and out of their rhythm? Like this is much more high level than just like I'm looking for an underhook and then I'm going to do a shoulder crunch, you know. This is trying to really start to link all of your skills with abstract principles of making your opponent tired, changing levels, being unpredictable, playing the mat, playing the round timer, trying to learn how to honestly like point farm in competitions. These are things that are not developed overnight. Learning how to disengage and when to engage, when to disengage, the parameters for when you should be pinning and when you should give up a pin. These are all different tactics that take a very long time to learn, and they really start to come together, I think, at black belt. And it's stuff that really sets them apart is that, you know, even maybe like for example, it could be instead of a lot of times like you'll see guys doing a scramble and one falls down on the ground and then they kind of just like reset, right? They'll just let the guy get back up and come back up on top. And it's like, no, a black belt will take advantage of that and know that maybe you were on top initially because you wanted to be on top because that's what you're good at. He's going to be thinking you don't have much of a guard. So as soon as I get you falling or stumbling backwards, I'm going to be pushing you back and making sure that I get on top. I'm going to take advantage of every little mistake you make, and start to impose my game on you through that. And another thing with that is like black belts will also be very, very good at Kazushi, right? So your ability to create Kazushi, and Kazushi just means off balancing, create off balances in your opponent is super important, and it precedes everything else that happens, right? It supersedes everything else that happens. So it's like you already have your skills built out from brown belt, and you still will be developing them at black belt. We never stop. But once you're a black belt, you're starting to like master these moves that need to come before the moves. So the ability to off balance your partner, attack their structure before you attack the man, right? So this is something that's, again, super high level, to be able to do that all the time. It's like you never actually have a direct attack. It's always like I do something else and then your reaction gives me what I want. And that's much more intelligent and multi-layered than what you're doing at earlier belts where you're just kind of like shooting for one move and it's obvious what you're going for, even if you don't telegraph it, but it's just a single move. It's a single faceted move. I just look for a guillotine. But then a black belt will be, I'm going to act like I want to do a go behind, and then when you open up your arms to stop me from getting to your back, I go to a guillotine, right? That's like more black belt level thinking, is starting to use dilemmas, tricks, tactics, intelligent breaking down of the stature and the structure of the man in order to get what they want. And finally, one last thing about black belts, and I would say that a black belt must have a defensive style that always goes straight into offense, right? So you should be learning this from the beginning, but I think especially at black belt, like you got to have a style where you don't stay in defensive cycles for very long. Like if somebody's attacking you or trying to pass, your ability to retain should automatically go right into offense. So that's something that like I'm trying to work on right now a lot, is I'm really trying to bulletproof my guard to the point where whatever guard pass someone tries, I have immediate offensive options that I go into. So somebody comes around for a hip and knee post, I'm grabbing that near arm and I'll pull them in with an arm drag, and then I'm going into K guard right away. So I don't want anybody to be able to attack me for free. And that's something that high level black belts will be able to do. They're going to be able to go from a pin escape straight into offense. They're going to be able to go from a submission escape right into counter offense. They're going to be able to go from retaining guard to making a connection, off balancing, and then going into offense. So these are all like meta skills that you need. And these are the things that really like set a black belt apart from a brown belt, purple belt, blue belt, in my opinion. So yeah, I think that covers it, guys. This is pretty well exhausts what I would talk about, I think, and how I would, if I ran a gym, this is how I would promote people. And if people didn't get one for like a long time, then, you know, we talk about, I guess I would try to handle it with like, let's talk about what you need to be doing, you know? Cause I think it's worth so much more when you get your belt and you really worked hard for it. I took a long time to get my purple belt, and I don't feel like I'm ever going to be embarrassed by another purple belt at all. So, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if this was helpful for you guys, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. So as always, this is Eddie with Crash and Flow BJJ. I'll see you guys on the mats.